He hid a beautiful alien girl from the police, then she confessed she was the reason the moon was cracked. The police siren passed his street once, then twice, then a third time, slow this time, like they were tasting the air for fear. Elias Mercer stood very still beside the window, one hand on the old wooden frame, the other gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. Outside, the town looked almost normal, a grocery truck rolling by, a dog barking behind a fence, laundry moving in the wind. But nothing was normal anymore, because the moon was split across the sky. Even in daylight, it hung there like a broken tooth of God, huge and pale and impossible, a black fracture cutting through it from top to bottom, with glowing veins of silver light leaking through the crack. People had stopped calling it beautiful 3 weeks ago. Now they called it an omen. A warning. The end. Elias heard a soft movement behind him, a breath, the rustle of denim against an old chair. He turned. She was still there. The blue-skinned girl sat near the window, close enough to the light that her hair looked like white fire, long and straight over her shoulders, her face calm in a way that made him uneasy, like she had already survived something worse than this world could imagine. Her eyes were fixed on the police car parked half a block away. "They are checking houses by pattern now," she said, her voice low, smooth, careful with every word, not because she was afraid of speaking, but because she was afraid of being heard. Elias stared at her, trying not to sound angry, trying not to sound afraid, failing at both. "You said they were looking for a weapon suspect, not you." She looked at him then, and for a second he forgot the sirens, forgot the moon, forgot the way his own heartbeat had become a constant hammer since dawn. "I said they would call me that," she replied. The police radio crackled outside, a door slammed, boots on pavement. Elias crossed the room in 3 quick steps and pulled the curtain almost shut, leaving only a thin line of light. His house had once been a repair shop, before the factory closed, before his wife left, before half the town started taking night jobs in the city and pretending things were still okay. Now it was tools, shelves, old coffee tins full of screws, and one secret that could get him arrested or killed. He looked at her again, at the deep blue skin, the faint silver marks at her wrists, the way she sat too still when danger was close. 3 hours ago he had found her behind his shed, barefoot, bleeding from one shoulder, covered in dirt, with a police drone circling the alley and a crowd 2 streets over screaming at the sky because the crack in the moon had flashed again. He should have called it in. He knew that. Any sane person would have. Instead he dragged her inside and locked the door. He still did not fully know why. Maybe it was because she looked more exhausted than dangerous. Maybe it was because when she lifted her head and whispered please, he heard the sound of someone who had not asked for mercy in a very long time. Maybe it was because after the moon cracked, everybody started acting like monsters, and he was tired of adding to the count. A hard knock hit the front door. "Police," a man shouted, "open up." Elias shut his eyes for one breath, then opened them and pointed to the back storage alcove. "Behind the shelves, now." She moved fast, silent, like she weighed nothing. In 2 seconds she was behind the stacked crates and torn tarp, hidden in the dark corner where he kept broken radios and winter tires. Elias ran a hand over his face, opened the door, and forced his shoulders to relax. Officer Trent stood there with 2 others, one of them holding a tablet, the other a rifle slung too casually to be comforting. "Mercer," Trent said, "we are doing a sweep, unidentified female suspect in the district, possible connection to the orbital incident." Orbital incident. That was the polite term now. As if the moon had merely malfunctioned. Elias nodded and stepped aside. "Go ahead." They came in without thanking him. One officer scanned the kitchen, another checked the hallway. Trent stayed near Elias and watched his face, the way men do when they hope guilt will introduce itself. "You been home all morning?" Trent asked. "Mostly," Elias said, "heard the sirens, saw people running, figured someone robbed the pharmacy again. Trent did not smile. You see anyone unusual? Elias shrugged, only the moon. For one dangerous second, Trent almost laughed. Then the officer in the hall called out clear. The one with the tablet lifted it and glanced at a grainy image, a blur of white hair and dark clothing between two fences. If she comes here, Trent said, do not play hero, this is bigger than you think. Elias held his gaze, bigger than all of us, from the look of the sky. Trent stepped closer, lowering his voice. You got no idea. Then they left. The door shut. The house stayed silent for a full 5 seconds. Elias turned the lock slowly, then stood with his forehead against the wood, breathing like he had just run uphill. From the back alcove came her voice, softer than before. You lied well. He turned and snapped, I am not doing this for you. She emerged from the shadows, her white hair catching the thin line of light from the curtain, her shoulder bleeding through the dark fabric again. Then why did you do it, Elias? He hated the way she said his name, like she had known it before he spoke it. He hated even more that he did not ask how. Sit down, he muttered, you are dripping on my floor. He pulled a metal chair to the table and opened an old first aid tin, gauze, alcohol, tape, things left over from years of fixing machines and skin with the same tired hands. She sat across from him and gently moved her top aside at the shoulder. The wound was not from a bullet. It was a burn, circular at the edges, deep in the center, like something hot and clean had passed through the air and kissed her flesh. Drone shot, Elias said. Pulse round, she corrected, not meant to kill, meant to slow. He cleaned the wound and she did not flinch, not once, not even when the alcohol touched raw skin. That unsettled him more than a scream would have. What are you? He asked quietly. Her eyes lifted to his. A refugee, first. He wrapped the bandage tight. And second. She looked toward the window, toward the fractured moon hanging over the town beyond the curtain. The reason your people are afraid to look up. Elias let go of the bandage. The room went so quiet he could hear the ticking of the old wall clock and a kid somewhere outside shouting for his mother. Say that again, Elias whispered. She did not blink. I am the reason the moon was cracked. His chair scraped back hard against the floor. No, he said, no, that is crazy, that is some cult talk or trauma talk or whatever game you are running, nobody cracks the moon. She stood too, but slowly, carefully, palms open, not threatening, not pleading. I did not do it alone, she said, and I did not mean for it to happen here. Elias laughed once, a short broken sound. Here we go, he said, this is where you tell me secret soldiers chased you through a portal and now my house is a war zone. Her face changed then, not anger, not fear, something heavier. It was not a portal, she said, it was a gate built inside your moon when your oceans were young. He stared at her. He should have thrown her out. He should have called Trent and ended this. Instead he heard himself ask the question that ruined any chance of a normal day. Who are you really? She touched her chest lightly, almost like a ritual. My name is Lyra, son of the Ninth Archive, and I came to seal a machine beneath your moon before men from my world could wake it. Elias sat down because his knees no longer trusted him. Outside, another siren rose, then faded. Lyra remained standing, looking at the crack in the moon through the curtain gap as if she were looking at a wound in someone she loved. On my world, she said, there was a war long before your species made fire, not a war for land, a war for memory. Whoever controlled the gates controlled where history could travel, armies, plagues, fuel, stars, even entire populations. Your moon held one of the oldest anchors ever built, hidden, dormant, forgotten, until recently. Elias rubbed his face hard, trying to force sense into the words. You expect me to believe aliens hit a machine inside the moon and now the police are hunting you because you tried to stop other aliens from turning it on? No, she said, I expect you to believe your police are hunting me because they were told I caused the fracture, and because frightened governments obey the loudest voice in the room. His head snapped up. Governments. She nodded. I did not arrive alone, Elias, others came first. Men who know how to wear your language in your uniforms, men who offered your leaders answers after the crack, men who promised safety if they were allowed to manage the response. The room suddenly felt colder. You are saying they are already inside the system. I am saying they helped build the story you now hear on every screen. Elias thought of the broadcasts, the talking heads, the emergency banners, the endless words about unidentified energy events, rogue actors, isolated risks, stay indoors, trust official channels. He thought of the way no one ever answered the same question twice. He looked at Lyra and saw the bandage on her shoulder, the dirt under her nails, the exhaustion around her eyes. If this is true, he said, why hide in a town like this, why my place? Lyra finally sat down, and for the first time she looked tired enough to be human. Because the gate key imprinted to the first living mind that touched it after the fracture event, she said, and that mind was mine. They can track the key when it activates, but not when it sleeps. I came down blind, injured, hunted, and your house was the nearest shielded structure with thick metal walls and analog wiring. Elias blinked. You picked my house because it is old. She almost smiled. Yes. He stared at the shelves, the rusted radio parts, the broken fan motors, the coil copper hanging from hooks, the life he used to think was nothing but leftovers. And for the first time in years, Elias Mercer felt something very strange rise in his chest beneath the fear. He mattered. A loud flash lit the room from outside. Both of them turned toward the window. The crack in the moon pulsed silver-white, bright enough to cast shadows across the floor in broad daylight. Lyra inhaled sharply, no, 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 no. What is that? Elias said. The gate is trying to open again, she whispered, someone has the core ring. Before he could answer, every phone in the house screamed with an emergency alert tone. Even the old one he kept plugged in for storms. A government message filled the screen in red letters, curfew immediate, do not shelter unidentified individuals, report blue-skinned female considered extreme threat. Elias looked from the phone to Lyra, then to the cracked moon blazing over the town. He spoke before he could talk himself out of it. Tell me what to do. Lyra looked at him long and hard, as if weighing whether one tired mechanic from a collapsing town could carry the next words. Then she leaned forward and placed her palm on the table between them. Under the old wood, something vibrated. Elias jerked back. A hidden compartment clicked open beneath a loose plank he had never noticed in 20 years of living there. Inside was a metal cylinder the length of his hand, dark silver, engraved with rings of symbols that moved when he blinked. Elias stared at it. That was in my floor. Lyra nodded once. Your grandfather hid it. Elias felt the room tilt. My grandfather died before I was born. He did not hide it for you, Lyra said, he hid it for this day. Elias looked up slowly, fury and fear tangling together. Stop doing that, stop talking like my life is some script you already read. Lyra met his anger without backing away. I am trying to save your world, Elias, and I am running out of time. He grabbed the cylinder and instantly dropped it with a hiss. It burned cold, not hot, cold enough to hurt. Lyra took it and the symbols brightened, reflecting silver in her eyes. This is the anchor key sheath, she said, without the core ring it cannot open the gate, but it can close it if we reach the fracture node before they complete the sequence. Elias said, absolutely not. She held his gaze. I cannot cross the perimeter alone, and they already mapped my signature. Every drone in this district is looking for me. but you are local, unregistered, invisible in the way poor men often are to powerful systems. He hated how true that was. He hated more that she was right. A low boom rolled through the air, not thunder, something deeper, like the sky itself had shifted weight. Dust fell from the ceiling. Outside, people started shouting. Elias moved to the window and pulled the curtain just enough to see. 2 streets over, neighbors were in the road looking up, some filming, some praying, one woman crying while her son clung to her arm. In the cracked line across the moon, silver light was spreading, branching, widening. How long? Elias asked without turning. Lyra stood behind him now, close enough that he could feel the coolness of her skin in the air. If the gate opens fully, maybe 15 minutes before instability reaches your tides, your grid, your satellites, then your crust stress lines begin to answer the pull. He turned slowly. Say that in normal people words. Her voice broke for the first time. If we fail, this world begins to die tonight. The words landed hard. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Tonight. Elias looked at the police car still parked down the street, at the officers talking to frightened neighbors, at the emergency message on his phone, at the woman they all wanted him to turn in. He thought of his ex-wife in the city, of his brother offshore on a cargo route, of the little girl next door who left chalk drawings on his steps, of the life he complained about every day as if ordinary was a curse. Then he looked at Lyra and saw that she was not asking for trust anymore. She was asking for courage. He exhaled once, long and steady. Tell me where we are going. Lyra closed her eyes for 1 second, relief and sorrow passing across her face together. The old quarry outside town, she said, beneath it is a relay shaft linked to the lunar anchor. Your grandfather worked there before the closure, that is how he found the sheath, that is how he learned enough to hide it. Elias grabbed his keys, a flashlight, a canvas tool bag, then stopped and looked at her clothing, at the blue skin impossible to hide in daylight. Wait here. He disappeared into the back room and returned with an old paint-stained hooded coat, a work scarf, and a pair of gloves. Lyra looked at the coat, then at him. This will not hide my face. No, Elias said, but it will make people stare half a second later, and right now half a second is a lot. For the first time, Lyra gave a real smile, small, tired, and heartbreakingly grateful. They moved through the back alley behind his shed, slipping between fences while sirens drifted across town like hungry insects. Elias led her through routes he had known since he was 10, past the empty lot where the mill workers used to park, behind the laundromat, across a drainage ditch lined with broken bottles and weeds. Everywhere he looked, people were staring at the sky. No one was looking at the ground. At the old underpass, a police drone swept overhead, red scan light slicing across the wall. Elias yanked Lyra down behind a concrete pillar and covered her with his body before he thought about what he was doing. The drone hovered, hummed, moved on. Lyra looked up at him, eyes wide for once. You would die for strangers too, she said quietly. He frowned. I am not dying for anybody if I can help it. But she kept looking at him like she had just found proof of something she had wanted to believe for a very long time. They reached the pickup truck hidden behind a chain-link fence near the scrapyard, an old rust-colored thing Elias kept running through stubbornness and prayer. It started on the second try, coughing like a smoker. As they bounced onto the road toward the quarry, emergency broadcasts cut in and out on the radio, official warnings, false reports, claims the crack was stabilizing, claims hostile terrorists were attacking infrastructure, claims citizens should remain calm while fighter jets screamed across the clouds. Lyra stared at the dashboard radio as if listening for lies more than facts. Elias drove with both hands tight on the wheel. At the edge of town, they hit the first checkpoint. Police vehicles, portable barriers, armed officers, floodlights even in daylight. Elias swore under his breath. Lyra touched the metal cylinder in her coat. There is another road, she said. There used to be, Elias replied, landslide took it out years ago. Lyra turned to him, trust me. He almost laughed at the absurdity of that sentence in this moment, then slammed the truck into a dirt service path and drove hard through brush and loose stone, branches clawing the doors, tires skidding on gravel. The old road was not gone. It was buried. Mostly. Enough remained to crawl through if you were desperate and reckless. Elias was both. When they finally reached the quarry rim, the sky had darkened even though the sun was still up, silver light from the moon fracture flickering across the rock walls like lightning trapped in stone. In the center pit stood a structure that had not been there last month. Black towers, smooth and curved, arranged in a ring around a shaft that dropped into the earth, cables pulsing with the same silver light as the crack above. Men in dark uniforms moved between consoles, not police, not military. Elias recognized, too clean, too synchronized. And at the center platform, held in a cradle of light, was a floating metal ring the size of a car tire, spinning silently. The core ring, Lyra whispered. Elias swallowed, there are too many. Lyra looked at him, and whatever she saw made her decision hurt. Then we do this the human way. Before he could ask what that meant, she pressed the cylinder into his hands and stepped out from cover. "Hey!" Elias shouted instinctively, but she was already walking down the quarry slope, hood falling back, white hair blazing under the fractured light. The men below turned as one. Alarms rose. Weapons lifted. Lyra spread her arms and shouted in a language Elias had never heard, a language of sharp edges and mourning, loud enough to cut through machinery and sirens and the screaming sky. Every head turned to her. Every weapon aimed at her. And in that instant Elias understood. She was giving him the path. He ran. Down the opposite slope, sliding on loose rock, clutching the cylinder, lungs burning, knees slamming against stone, too old for this, too scared to stop. Shots cracked across the quarry, blue-white pulses tearing chunks from rock walls. Someone screamed. He did not look back. He reached the platform ladder, climbed, hands slipping on dust and blood because somewhere along the run his palm had torn open. The core ring spun above the shaft, humming now, louder, the sound inside his teeth. A voice thundered behind him in perfect English, "Drop the sheath, human." Elias turned just enough to see one of the dark uniformed men on the platform, face almost human, eyes wrong, silver all the way through. The man leveled a weapon at his chest. Elias looked at the ring, then at the cylinder in his hands, then at Lyra across the pit, on her knees now, held down by two guards, blood at her lip, still staring at him, still shouting something he could not hear. Maybe he was supposed to know what to do with the sheath. Maybe there was a sequence, a code, a ritual. He did not know any of it. He was a mechanic from a town nobody visited unless they were lost. So he did the only thing he had ever been good at when a machine was screaming and time was gone. He trusted his hands. Elias slammed the cylinder into the open gap at the base of the ring cradle and twisted until metal met metal with a brutal grinding lock. For half a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world exploded with light. Silver fire raced through every cable, every tower, every crack in the quarry floor. The floating ring shuddered, shrieked, and reversed its spin. The shaft below roared like an ocean being pulled through a drain. The dark uniformed man fired, Elias felt the pulse round hit his side like a sledgehammer, and he flew backward off the platform onto the stone. The sky went white. Then black. Then white again. When sound returned, it came in pieces, falling rock, people yelling, engines dying, the long impossible groan of something ancient sealing shut far above them in the moon. Elias opened his eyes to dust and pain and a taste of iron in his mouth. The silver light in the sky was fading. The crack was still there, huge and terrible, but no longer growing. The moon stopped flashing. Hands grabbed his shoulders. He swung weakly, then heard her voice. Elias, Elias, stay with me. Lyra knelt beside him, blue hands trembling, blood and dust on her face, her eyes brighter than the fading light overhead. He tried to laugh and coughed instead. Did we win? Her mouth shook as she nodded. We stopped the opening, she said, you stopped it. Around them, the black towers were collapsing inward, their smooth surfaces splitting into ash, the dark uniformed men fleeing toward vehicles that no longer started, some already disappearing into the dust and chaos as police sirens rushed in from the highway. Elias tried to sit up, pain spearing through his side. Lyra supported him gently. You are hurt badly. I have been hurt badly before, he muttered, this one at least has a story. She made a sound then, half laugh, half sob, and pressed her forehead to his for one brief second. The police arrived in waves, guns up, shouting orders, lights sweeping the quarry, but the scene before them was too strange, too broken, too large for easy blame. Officers cuffed the surviving uniformed men, medics ran to the injured, cameras came soon after, then officials, then more officials. In the confusion, Lyra pulled Elias behind a shattered loader and helped him stand. You need a hospital, she said. You need to run, he replied. She looked toward the quarry edge where helicopters circled, then back at him. If I stay, they will build another lie around me, if I go, they will still try, but now they have witnesses, and they have you. Elias grimaced, great, exactly what I wanted, paperwork and global conspiracies. Lyra smiled through tears. Your species makes jokes when afraid, I always loved that. He stared at her, you always loved that. She touched the side of his face very lightly. We have been watching your world for a long time, Elias Mercer, not to conquer, not to judge, to learn if courage could survive in a young species before the old war found you again. He swallowed, suddenly angry at the ache in his chest that had nothing to do with the wound. And what is the answer? Lyra looked up at the cracked moon, then back at him. Today, because of one human in a forgotten town, the answer is yes. The sirens drew closer. Voices shouted nearby. Lyra stepped back, pulling up the hood of the old coat. Will I see you again? Elias asked before he could stop himself. She held his gaze, all that silver light and sorrow and strength inside it. When your moon heals, she said, I will come back and tell you what your grandfather knew. Then she turned and disappeared into dust, machinery smoke, and the moving shadows of men who still did not understand what had happened in their own quarry. Elias tried to follow, took one step, nearly collapsed, and was caught by two paramedics shouting at him to stay down. He let them lower him to the stretcher. As they carried him toward the ambulances, he looked past the flashing lights, past the officers, past the cameras already hungry for the wrong story. He looked at the sky. The moon was still cracked. Still scarred. Still impossible. But for the first time since the fracture, it was quiet. And in that quiet, with blood on his shirt and dust in his teeth and the whole world changing around him, Elias Mercer felt something he had not felt in years. Not fear. Not grief. Not regret. Hope. 3 months later, they called it the quarry event on the news, then the Mercer incident, then a dozen other names designed to make it sound smaller than it was. Experts argued, officials denied, leaked files appeared, disappeared, reappeared, and no one could fully explain the black towers that turned to ash or the false command chains hiding inside emergency response systems. Officer Trent visited Elias twice, once in the hospital and once at home, both times with questions he pretended were casual and eyes that said he knew the truth was bigger than his badge. The town changed too. People who had once cursed the sky now sat on porches at night and watched the cracked moon in silence, as if learning to live with scars made them kinder to their own. Kids painted it on walls. Old men pointed at it and told stories with more wonder than fear. And Elias, patched up and slower on cold mornings, reopened the repair shop for real this time. Not because business was good. Because people kept coming. Broken radios, broken lamps, broken tractors, broken locks, broken things they could have replaced but chose to save. One evening, just after sunset, he found a small metal object on his workbench that had not been there when he locked up. A silver bolt, smooth and warm, engraved with moving symbols. Beside it lay a folded paper in neat handwriting he now knew too well. For the next fracture, start with the east wall, there is another compartment, also, stop ignoring your roof leak, Lyra. Elias stood there for a long time, reading the note again and again, smiling so hard it hurt. Outside, the cracked moon rose over the town, scarred but steady, bright above rooftops and power lines and ordinary lives that had no idea how close they had come to ending. He looked up at it, then at the note in his hand. And this time, when he spoke into the quiet workshop, he did not sound afraid at all. Come back soon, Blue Girl. We have a lot to fix.